I slid the folder across the conference table and watched Priya's lawyer stop mid-sentence. "You can't do this," Priya said, her voice cracking on the word can't. I already had. The papers were signed, the wire was scheduled, and in 6 hours I would no longer own a single share of the company we'd built together. Nobody in that room understood yet why I'd waited until the morning of the Vantage deal to do it. My name is Dana Whitfield. I'm 36, and for 8 years I co-owned a branding agency in Portland called North and Vale Creative. I handled operations, finance, contracts, the unglamorous machinery that kept the lights on. My business partner, Priya Rains, was the face of the company. She had the eye, the charm, the client relationships. I had the seed money. We met in college, both broke, both ambitious, sketching logo concepts on napkins in a diner that's long gone now. When my father passed and left me a small inheritance, I put almost all of it into starting the agency. That gave me 60% ownership. Priya took 40, plus the title of creative director. It felt fair at the time. She built the brand, I built the backbone. For years that balance worked. We rented a converted warehouse near the Pearl District, and every Monday we did a coffee walkthrough of the week's accounts, just the two of us. It was a small ritual, but it made the partnership feel real, like we were still those two women from the diner. I trusted her completely. I thought we were building something we'd both retire from together. The imbalance started quietly, long before I noticed it. Every press feature, every panel invite, every Meet the Founder interview went to Priya. My name rarely came up. I told myself it didn't matter, that the operations side wasn't supposed to be glamorous. But clients started referring to the agency as Priya's studio. Even our own junior staff began asking her for sign-off on decisions that were legally mine to make. I laughed it off more than once. That was my weakness. I mistook silence for stability, and I let recognition slide because I didn't want to seem petty. Then, last spring, a company called Vantage Group approached us about an acquisition. Vantage wanted a boutique creative brand to fold into their portfolio, and they wanted Priya specifically. Their initial term sheet barely mentioned my role at all. I remember Priya waving it off. "It's just early paperwork," she said. "They'll structure it properly once we're serious." I believed her. Around that time, we hired a new senior copywriter named Jordan Alvarez. Priya brought him in without the usual 2-interview process we normally required, and she pushed the hire through fast, citing a tight deadline on the Holden account, our biggest client. I remember thinking it was unusual, but I signed off anyway. Trust, again. 3 weeks after Jordan started, the Holden account exploded. Their VP called me directly, furious, saying our team had submitted a campaign concept lifted almost word for word from a competitor's award-winning work the year before. It wasn't true, not of me, not really, but somehow every draft, every file timestamp, every email trail pointed straight at my desk. "I never touched that file," I told Priya in her office, my hands actually shaking. She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on her before, something between pity and calculation. "Dana, the logs don't lie," she said. "Maybe you were more stressed than you realized. Maybe you don't even remember doing it." That sentence still replays in my head. Maybe you don't even remember doing it. She wasn't defending me. She was building a case. The Holden VP demanded someone be held accountable before they'd continue the contract. Priya called an emergency partner meeting with our 3 department leads present, which she'd never done without me initiating it before. She stood at the head of the table, my table, in the office my money built, and said the plagiarism had come from operational negligence, a phrase clearly aimed at me without naming me outright. Jordan sat there nodding along, saying he'd flagged concerns internally weeks ago, which was news to me, since no such flag existed in any system I had access to. Someone laughed nervously. Nobody defended me. I sat there with my face burning, watching 8 years of trust evaporate in real time. Afterward, in front of the whole team, Priya said the words that would echo through everything that came next. "You're just the spreadsheet, Dana. I'm the brand." She said it lightly, almost like a joke, and 2 people actually chuckled. I didn't respond. I gathered my laptop and walked out to my car in the parking garage and sat there for almost 40 minutes without turning the key. I couldn't remember driving home that night. I just remember standing in my kitchen at 11 p.m., staring at a mug I hadn't used in years, wondering how someone I'd trusted with my father's money could dismantle me so casually. I didn't sleep. I kept replaying her voice. "You're just the spreadsheet." I called my older brother, Malcolm, because I needed someone who wasn't tangled up in the company. He listened for a long time before he said anything. "Dana, something about this timeline feels off. New hire, sudden crisis, emergency meeting, all inside a month? That's not bad luck. That's a sequence." His question sat in my chest for 2 days. I started quietly reviewing things I normally wouldn't have questioned: expense reports, onboarding paperwork, old email chains. That's when I found it. Buried in a shared drive folder that Jordan had accidentally left open to the whole creative team, instead of just his manager, was a private message thread between him and Priya, dated a full 10 days before his official start date. In it, Priya wrote that she needed someone who could help clean up the ownership structure before Vantage finalizes anything, and Jordan replied that he understood and that he'd keep detailed notes on anything that could support a for-cause removal. My stomach dropped reading it. For-cause removal was language straight out of our operating agreement, the clause that let a partner be stripped of authority, though not ownership, if the other could prove serious misconduct with board approval. She hadn't hired an employee, she'd hired a witness. I didn't confront her right away. I sat with it for a full day, terrified I was misreading something, terrified I wasn't. Then I remembered our operating agreement had one clause Priya always underestimated, because she'd never bothered to read the fine print the way I had. As majority shareholder, I held the right to sell my shares to an outside buyer, provided I offered Priya right of first refusal with a 72-hour window to match the price. She controlled the brand, I controlled the exit. I called our company's outside counsel, a woman named Renata Choi, who'd known us both since we incorporated. I laid out what I'd found. She was careful, methodical, the kind of ally who doesn't just take your side because she likes you. "Before we do anything," Renata said, "I need to see the actual documentation, not just your read on a screenshot. If this is what you think it is, it's serious. If it isn't, we need to know that too." That pause mattered to me. I didn't want validation. I wanted the truth. Over the next several days, I built a timeline instead of arguing. I pulled Jordan's original interview notes, which showed no red flags about my department at all. I cross-referenced file metadata on the Halden campaign draft and found the original stolen concept had actually been uploaded under Jordan's login, 2 days before I ever opened the file myself. I calculated something else too. Over 6 years, I'd personally covered $41,000 in company shortfalls out of my own account during slow quarters, money Priya had told investors came from reinvested profits. It hadn't, it had come from me. Renata confirmed the metadata was legitimate and unaltered. "This isn't ambiguous," she told me. "This is premeditated." She also warned me the Vantage deal was scheduled to close in 9 days, and that if I moved, I needed to move before the ink dried, or my leverage would mean nothing. That same week, Priya tried a different approach. She called me twice on a Saturday, then showed up at my apartment unannounced, eyes red, telling me she felt blindsided by how distant I'd become. "We built this together," she said. "Don't let one bad month undo 8 years." Then, when I stayed quiet, her tone shifted. "People are starting to ask why you're so cold lately. It's making things awkward for everyone." A mutual friend, Sasha, texted me the next day saying Priya had told a group chat that I was having some kind of breakdown and that people should be gentle with her. I sat staring at that message for a long time. It wasn't concern. It was a narrative, and it was spreading without me in the room to correct it. I didn't argue with any of them. Arguing felt like exactly what she wanted, a distraction to keep me reactive instead of prepared. Instead, I asked Renata to draft the sale documents quietly, and I began looking for a buyer who could move fast. I found one through an old client contact, a mid-size regional agency called Birchline Studio, run by a founder named Elise Tran, who'd been trying to expand into Portland for 2 years and had the capital ready to act immediately. Elise didn't just take my word either. She asked pointed questions about the company's financials, about whether this was personal retaliation dressed up as a business decision. "I'm not interested in buying a grudge," she told me over the phone. I sent her the metadata, the shortfall records, the operating agreement. She called back 2 days later and said, "This isn't a grudge. This is a company that's been quietly financed by one partner while the other tried to erase her." She made an offer within 48 hours. Under our agreement, once I had a legitimate outside offer, I had to formally notify Priya and give her the right of first refusal. I asked Renata to deliver the notice the same morning the Vantage lawyers were flying in for final signatures, because timing was the only advantage I had left. Priya would have exactly 72 hours to match Elise's offer or lose her majority control entirely. She called me 9 minutes after receiving it, "You're doing this now? During the biggest week of the company's life?" she said. I answered as evenly as I could. "You built this timeline, Priya. I'm just working inside it." She hung up on me. 2 days later, our full leadership team was called into the conference room for what Priya framed as a routine pre-close briefing before Vantage arrived. She stood at the head of the table again, the same spot from the day she humiliated me. "I want to be transparent," she said to the room. "Dana's decided to make some drastic moves right as we're closing the biggest deal of our careers. I think we all deserve to understand why." She told her version first. She said I'd grown erratic since the Halden incident, that I was punishing the team for a mistake I'd made, and that selling shares now was an act of sabotage against everyone's hard work. A couple of people nodded along. Jordan sat near the back, arms crossed, saying nothing, which somehow felt worse than if he'd spoken. I let her finish completely. Then I opened the folder. I started with the basic fact. The Halden file wasn't uploaded from my account. It was uploaded from Jordan's, 2 days before I ever saw the draft. I turned the printed metadata toward the table. A few people leaned forward. Then I gave the specific figure. "I've personally covered $41,000 in shortfalls over 6 years, money that was reported to investors as reinvested profit." Someone across the table went very still. Then I showed the message thread. Priya's own words, 10 days before Jordan's start date, about needing someone to help clean up the ownership structure and build a case for for-cause removal. The room went silent in a way I'd never heard it go silent before. Jordan's arms uncrossed. Priya tried to redirect. "That message is being taken out of context," she said, her voice tightening. "We were discussing normal restructuring, that's all." But Renata, sitting quietly at the end of the table, spoke for the first time. "Then perhaps you can explain why for-cause removal appears verbatim in our operating agreement's misconduct clause and nowhere else in company language." Nobody had an answer for that. One of our department leads, a longtime employee named Priya, had always counted as loyal, looked at her for a long moment, and then looked away. That was the moment I understood something had shifted permanently in that room. Not everyone flipped to my side outright. A few stayed carefully neutral, unwilling to pick a fight with whoever ended up in charge. But the certainty Priya had walked in with was gone. I gave her one last look before I said what I'd been holding on to for weeks. "You told me I was just the spreadsheet. Turns out the spreadsheet was the only thing holding this company together. It wasn't loud, and I didn't need it to be. I watched it land. Then I told the room plainly what would happen next. Elise Tran's offer stood. Priya had until the 72-hour window closed to match it herself, in full, in writing. She didn't have the capital, and everyone at that table now understood why the Vantage deal existed in the first place, because Priya needed an outside buyer to finance a plan she'd already set in motion months earlier. The window closed 2 days later with no counteroffer. My shares transferred to Birchline Studio the following morning. The same morning I stood in that conference room and slid the folder across the table where this story began. Vantage's lawyers, sitting in on that final session, quietly excused themselves less than an hour afterward. Their acquisition required clean, undisputed ownership, and what they'd just watched was neither clean nor undisputed. The deal collapsed within the week. Elise kept me on for 90 days as a paid transition consultant, which is a courtesy I hadn't expected but was grateful for. Priya remained creative director under new majority ownership, no longer the person with final say over anything financial. Jordan resigned before Elise's team even finished their first internal review. The Halden account stayed, once the client saw the corrected file history and a formal factual explanation instead of a scapegoat. Priya and I haven't spoken since the transfer closed. I heard through a former coworker that she still tells people I panicked and sold out during a stressful week. I don't correct it anymore. The metadata already did that for me. I think about what I misunderstood for a long time. I thought loyalty meant staying quiet, that if I just kept covering the gaps, the recognition would eventually balance itself out. It never does on its own. My weakness wasn't trusting Priya, it was assuming a good partnership doesn't need boundaries just because it started with love. The lesson wasn't really about betrayal. It was about the fact that I'd built real protection into that agreement years earlier and almost let guilt talk me out of using it. Selling my shares wasn't revenge. It was the only door in that contract that had always been mine to walk through, and I finally stopped waiting for permission to use it. So tell me honestly, was I wrong for selling my shares the same morning the acquisition was supposed to close, or should I have given Priya one more chance to come clean on her own terms? Drop your verdict in the comments, and subscribe if you want more true stories like this one.